Yes, I have a question for Thomas. You made a wonderful presentation about all the things your company does to meet reporting requirements and to contribute to achieving sustainability. Often this reporting is triggered by government action, etc. So it takes place in an institutional environment, in a policy environment. What is, from your perspective, from the perspective of a private company, the kind of government that you would like to see? What are your expectations from institutions? Would you like more voluntary commitments, or would you like to see more policy guidelines, or would you like to see more regulations, structuring markets? That would be very interesting, I think, for all of us to hear your take about this.
Okay, so first of all, the very interesting aspect of reporting, which, by the way, as you might have all seen, is a very dynamic thing at the moment with the GRI V4, with the French legal environment is moving very fast on that with the Article 225, etc., etc. The Equator principles that are now at their third version, etc. So it's moving very fast. But I would just nuance, John, your question or your statement. In fact, the very interesting thing here is that we started to report on a voluntary basis. The 2008-2012 period I mentioned, during that period, reporting was not compulsory. Well, it was somehow compulsory in France with the NRE law of 2001, but the extent and the details that we gave to all our stakeholders was far exceeding what was expected by regulation. And only now, well, since in fact April 2012, has regulation in fact caught with what was already the practice of companies. So that's just about, let's call it environmental, social, societal, or governance disclosure. On your second question, it's really a fundamental question. I can't give a simple answer. There are some items on which I think there should be clear, simple regulation, and there are some other items where the states should really leave all societal actors to self-govern themselves. I mean, obviously, it hasn't worked well in finance, but the EU ETS is also a failure. So at this moment, so that was a very complex regulation which has not brought its intended objectives. So that's about the answer I can give. Yeah.
My question was basically in the line of Jon's question. Maybe I can move on by asking specifically then on your Thomas, your perspective on partnerships. Partnerships have been mentioned as a way of governance, so to speak. There has been questions about legitimacy of partnerships, and the project that you mentioned clearly have a important societal impact. They had the positive externalities. So what is I'm not sure whether your company is involved in partnerships, but do you see that as a useful way of giving more structure maybe to the societal contribution of such large companies? Or would you prefer to do that on your own initiative as the examples that you've talked about?
Thanks for the question. No, we are definitely in the state of mind that we are now in a totally interdependent world, and we apply that in all the aspects of the management of the company. So just a few examples that pop to my mind. One example of partnerships. You know, we were talking earlier about ecosystems and how to value them or how to measure them. We have, well, our waste management subsidiary has developed what they call ecological quality indicator, but obviously they are not experts. So they have developed that with the French National Museum for Natural History. And the story is even nicer because, in fact, it's an exchange of good practices. We get brain power and we manage their waste, for example. So these kind of anecdotal examples, but they're nice to quote. Then industrial partnerships. We are now into business models where our client, I take in the automotive industry, our client, I mean the one that will purchase waste management services, will at the same time be a supplier of ours because we will buy from him spare scraps, you know. And at the same time, we will, both of us will form a joint venture, and this is real life, it's not a hypothetical, will form a joint venture to deconstruct end-of-life vehicles. So this is an example we had with Renault, for example. There are other numerous examples like this with other industries. So same thing for innovation. We do some of the innovation by ourselves in our labs worldwide, but we also leverage on joint innovation through open innovation, through competitions that we organize.
Also with governments, with industry.
And yes, I was about to come to that. So, local governments are clients of ours. I mean, we have contracts for either water management or waste management with local governments. And there are very interesting evolutions to those business models. For example, in Australia, there is a system called the alliance contract, where, to cut a very complex story short, it's a sort of open book tender bid where the client will know exactly your price structure, and there is an agreement on sharing the pains and the gains. So you determine a sort of band, and above that band, if there is over profits, those will be shared between the local government and us. And if there are over costs, we will not bear the whole pain of those over costs. They will be borne also by the local government. So these kind of competitive mechanisms to award markets are, I think, spreading. And so this is a way of reestablishing trust. We also experiment that in France with new contracts with local governments, where we empower them much more than in the past through audits of the financials of the contracts, through giving them access to our IT tools so that they have a very fine granularity on the operational parameters, on the financial parameters. So yeah, it's you could call it a form of partnership.
Okay, thank you. So there's first. I don't know why. I don't know. And then Harry Gleckman. Sorry.
You talked about calculating the net present value of positive externalities. There was a recent study done on a much broader scale on negative externalities of business around the world that found that no sector of the economy would be profitable if you integrated all the negative externalities into their price structure. How do we deal with these kinds? Because we can't just turn off the economy. You must be experts now in calculating. Have you calculated negative externalities in your own activities? And how do we help the private sector to bridge this gap and become more responsible in the long term? Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I can give a short answer, because that's a extremely interesting debate. No, as a joke, I would say that we have many stakeholders that spend their time revealing our negative externalities. So it's only natural that we would spend some time to reveal our positive impacts. It's a joke, but I frankly believe in that. I think the question of negative externalities is really in the realm of governments. I mean, we have at this moment in France, debate against the framework of the so-called environmental conference. We have a debate about, for example, reducing the gap on taxation between diesel and gasoline. To me, it's really the job of government to gradually integrate into policy making, and here we have a shared responsibility into accounting and financial accounting, change the rules of accounting in order to better take into account externalities. So yes, you're right, but you're right that if you give the positive externalities, you should also give the negative externalities. But I would argue that under a given political framework, the negative externalities are dealt with, not always, not in all the places, by existing taxation or subsidies, etc. And some wise political choices can be made through better revealing positive externalities. I mean, we argue that investing in water, access to water and sanitation is the prerequisite. I mean, some others will argue that it's access to energy, but we will argue that it's access to water and sanitation is the ultimate prerequisite for any other form of development. So that's why it's important to reveal that it's not only a pain of that many millions in day one, but have a sort of total cost or total cost-benefit view of any particular investment.
My question is going to follow from that, but let me start first with, Alex, could you put up the slide where you have the MDGs and the SDGs? What I'm interested in is on, goal 8 and the future goal 12. What kind of metrics do you feel are realistic that will not just be measurement metrics, but decision-making metrics? That is, it may hold governments to a standard saying this is what you ought to use in making a choice or making a UN body choice because you have this number. And so I had some role in the goal 8, and I don't think it had any effective metrics. I don't know any governmental action taken that was said, we're not going to do this because of goal 8, or frankly, very many that said we're doing it because of goal 8. So I'm wondering how, in your view, metrics and the implementation, use of that metrics for decision making for 8 or in the future 12 would work. Thomas, there's a connected question. I think I have a similar question in a similar vein. Is the numbers that you're working out on positive and negative externalities, how do they integrate into decision making, whether you will go along with let's say an RFP for a job that's offered, which you assess the negative or positive externalities, and how do you integrate that into your decision making?
I go first? You go first. Within the UN, MDG number 8 has been the most debated and satanized goal. And if you go to different instances or sectors or entities or organizations or clusters, perhaps it's different. But for us, I guess it's honest and fair to say that we never really understood what the legacy of the administration of Secretary General Annan, Kofi Annan, was in that sense. We understood the intentions, but then I guess it's just counterculture for us and for national governments and for diplomats here and there to understand that the relationship with the private sector goes beyond asking for money. You have to increase your contribution to the general fund of the UN. You have to contribute what you are giving us for the humanitarian intervention. and you have to contribute whatever you give us to train people and so on and so forth. The Global Partnership for Development was supposed to have other particularities that, as you properly say, never really came into place. So I'm going to read two of the subsections that this goal now, number 12, says. So somehow, I believe this expresses this frustration and tries to propose a solution. 12D. Developed countries that have not done so to make concrete efforts towards the target of 0.7% of GDP as official development assistance to developing countries and 0.15 to 0.2 of GDP of developed countries to least developed countries should do so, finally. You remember the Paris Declaration and all these things behind until the Busan meeting on official development assistance, ODA. Basically what we are saying is that we want EU member states to adopt a goal in which you will empower someone, it doesn't have to be the UN, to actually monitor and publish, this information that is public already, but it will become somehow mandatory, the fact that you are not fulfilling your commitments. Because the Paris Declaration is a commitment. So this is an example of how to measure this thing. And the other one that is, I believe, quite interesting, and it's a very complicated issue, is 12E, which says to reduce illicit flows and tax evasion and increase stolen asset recovery by X%. Hopefully, to be able to use this for development. So, very complicated SDG, if it is to be approved like that. So that's why number 1, I mean the first one on top, 12A, you cannot see that, but I'm reading from the actual document. If you go there, you'll see it. Says support an open, fair, and development-friendly trading system, substantially reducing trade distorting measures, including agricultural subsidies, while improving market access of development country products. You know, it's very general. I don't think that I am going to see in my lifetime the complete dismantling of subsidies. So we go from all these expressions of ideals to actually something tangible. So I hope these tangibles become a reality. Yours.
I'm not sure I understood the question, so I will give you an answer which I hope answers your question. The benefits, the environmental benefits or societal benefits that we're talking when investing in a wastewater treatment plant are mostly invisible benefits, right? They are the reduction of a nuisance or the reduction of a pollution. So it's very difficult to see it. It's not like a bridge, it's not like a harbor, it's not like access to communications or transportation. So that's the first point. We do not calculate any positive externalities when we decide to respond to such or such RFP. We will make a global assessment, a financial assessment. What will be the profitability of that particular investment if we choose to bid? And we will bid and we will respect our internal investment criteria, profitability criteria, payback, etc., plus all the other investment criteria that I have listed. Each of our investments should, in one way or another, contribute to the commitments that we have taken. So in terms of contributing to our sustainability agenda. But we are not calculating whatsoever any positive externalities. And more than that, it should never be people like us who should be calculating these. These should really be calculated by external, independent third parties. We can be part of that effort by supplying data, but not be the one who will calculate that. But I think that usually governments, will do this kind of, local governments will do this kind of investments for compliance reason. I'm just saying that it would be interesting to add to the compliance aspect some form of value revelation rather than just meeting the discharge levels and which. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well.